Known as the Race to the Sun, Paris-Nice this year has been dogged by snow and cold weather. Not the ideal start to the season for six-time Tour de France winner Lance Armstrong. Riding for his new Discovery Channel team for the first time, he pulled out sick after 4 days. But as the first race in the new Pro Tour, it gave another American, Bobby Julich, the chance to write his name into the history books when he took the overall lead on Friday. On today's final stage, Bobby Julich will hope that his powerful CSC team can match all of the moves and help him become the first American ever to win the Course au Soleil, the Race to the Sun, Paris-Nice, next on Cyclism Sundays. Nice, the playground to the stars, the capital of Provence where the mountains come down to the sea. Today hosts the final stage of this year's Paris-Nice, and an American possibly on the edge of history. Bobby Julich started the day in the yellow and white jersey of leadership, hoping today to be the first American ever to win the Race to the Sun. As the riders come up to around about 20 miles to go, there's still one sprint point in the day left. The riders in the outskirts of Nice, an 8-man breakaway which formed after just 6 miles of racing. And they're still holding on to around about a 1-minute advantage over the main field. And probably the most dangerous rider in this leading group of racers is Gilberto, who started the day in 22nd place, 2.5 minutes behind Bobby Julich. Welcome to Cyclism Sundays. In a moment, we'll get back to the action of the final stage, stage 7 of this year's Paris-Nice. I'm Paul Sherwen, as always joined by Bob Roll. And yes, Phil Liggett is still missing on the southern part of Africa following one of Africa's premier cycling events, the Giro del Capo. Well, if you've tuned in this week to watch Lance Armstrong, bad news because the American did not come out to play on stage 4, unable to participate because of an early season chest and throat infection. But good news for American viewers because Bobby Julich is poised to be the first American ever not only to win the inaugural event in the World Pro Tour, but also the first American ever to win Paris-Nice. Bobby, what an incredible performance.
Great job by Bobby Julich. So far, he's realized a lifelong dream in putting on the leader's jersey of Paris-Nice, but it looks as if he might keep it all the way to the end now. Great time trialist, did a solid prologue, then he's been able to follow the teammates of his on CSC, do some other good rides in the hills, and took the leader's jersey on the top of Mount Ferron, and he starts the last stage still in the jersey.
Well, he certainly did. I think the most important thing was that he started very sensibly in the prologue with a 17th place, but not losing too much time, just 7 seconds arrears. And if you look at the next few stages, stages 1, 2, 3 and 4, he was never very far from the winner. The important thing, though, was when he went out on stage 5, he finished in 10th place, but ahead of everybody else to get himself that first place in the overall standings. And on stage 6, well, even though he was 18th and 4 minutes behind the winner, he still basically defended. Let's have a look at the overall classification then, because Bobby Julich still leads by 19 seconds from Constantino Zabaya and 20 seconds from Alejandro Valverde, with his own teammate Jens Voigt in 4th place. A little bit further back, he still has a teammate, Frank Schleck from Luxembourg, in 7th place. Cadel Evans riding a very good start to the season in 8th, 58 seconds in arrears. And looking a little bit further down at the pre-race notables, Alexander Vinokourov, the 2-time winner of Paris-Nice, 21st at 2 minutes 22. Tom Danielson leads home the rest of the Americans, 47th, 5:24 behind, with Dave Zabriskie just backing them up in 99th place, but he's done a lot of work for Team CSC. Well, let's have a look at the race route for the riders this afternoon. 135 kilometres rolling away from Nice this morning. 2 very difficult climbs in the early part of the day. The Côte de Duranes, that's 2.5 kilometres long. The Côte de la Porte, the Col de la Turbie very close to the end. And we should be picking up the action around about Nice before the start of the last climb of the day. Looking down on the front end of the main field here, that main field is being led by Team CSC, the team of Bobby Julich, and just surviving a few seconds up the road is a leading group of 8 riders made up of 7 men who escaped the field after just 10 kilometres. That leading group, in fact, is still holding on to a 35-second advantage. They built themselves up a lead of 1 minute and 50 seconds at one stage, but it was the presence of Gilberto Contador in that leading group that made Team CSC keep the pressure on for the whole of this afternoon's 135-kilometre stage. They're almost pulling it back together. We're inside 4 kilometres to go to the final sprint point of the day, and that's when the riders go over the start-finish line in Nice, then go out into the countryside for the final climb of the day, the Col d'Ez, which climbs up for 8 kilometres at an average gradient of 6%. And if Bobby Julich is still in the pack at that point, he will start to feel just that little bit more relieved and a little bit closer to writing his name to the top rank of American cycling history by becoming the first American ever to win Paris-Nice. But Oscar Pereiro here from Team Phonak has been on fire over the last 15 kilometres, trying to do whatever he can to break the grip of this leading group of 8 riders that he's with. And before they get caught, let's just remind ourselves who is in this group with him. Oscar Pereiro in the lime green jersey of Liggett. Just behind him there is Charlie Vergelis, David Moncoutier, the winner of the King of the Mountains classification in Paris-Nice this year, Vladimir Gustov of Fassa Bortolo, Rick Verbrugge is in here for Quick Step, Egoy Martinez is in here for Euskaltel Euskadi, and Gilberto Contador are the original 7 riders. But on the slopes of the Col de la Torbie, they were joined there by Aitor Osa from Ile Baleares, and as we speak, Bob, you can see there that it's pretty much all back together.
Just about to come all back together again. The little village that the breakaway just went through, this group led by CSC's team is just about to enter into also. So right about half a minute, of course, 40 seconds now. When you go on the last climb of the day and you've been on a long breakaway, it's very tough to hold off the peloton. Most of these riders haven't done a lot of work. They've been sitting in the front, especially Bobby Julich there, just in about 5th or 6th position in the yellow and white jersey. Aitor Osa, the freshest man probably in the breakaway at this point, who has just bridged across at the last climb. He, of course, is the teammate of the 3rd place rider right now, Alejandro Valverde. So watch for Aitor Osa to have some very strong legs on the last climb, perhaps put in some attacking there. He's a ways down himself on GC, so Team CSC won't have to worry about Osa that much, but it's his teammate Valverde, if he gets across to the breakaway, who they'll have to keep a very close watch on. And Bobby Julich himself might have to come out and match some of the accelerations that are sure to come on the last climb of the day, the Col d'Ez.
Welcome back to the last stage of Paris-Nice. As we just saw, the winner of the first stage, CSC rider Jens Voigt, took the prologue. Many of you at home have been wondering why CSC have been so dominant in this race, while Lance Armstrong's Discovery Channel team have been simply nowhere. Well, Craig Hum has been out in France following Paris-Nice, and he's going to give us a little insight.
What's really come about during this week of racing here at Paris-Nice is the teams have seemingly divided themselves into 2 separate camps. The first camp exemplified by Lance Armstrong and the Discovery Channel racing team. They came here with the sole purpose of getting kilometers into their legs and using this week as a training exercise. On the other side of the coin, however, Team CSC, Jens Voigt and Bobby Julich, they put a lot of training in before this week. They came here wanting to put people on the podium. Whereas Lance Armstrong went home with an illness early in the week, now it is American Bobby Julich who sits with the chance to claim perhaps the biggest crown of his racing career, and he can do it here on the Côte d'Azur, his home turf.
That's absolutely right. Every team in the Pro Tour has a completely different strategy, and I would have to say that Lance Armstrong's team is still thinking simply about the Tour de France. Well, looking down there, what a magnificent backdrop for a bicycle race. That's the old port of Nice, and if you've got a few dollars in your bank account, you could probably afford to park your yacht here. And this is where you used to keep your yacht tied up, isn't it, Bob? I thought
Yes,
we're not really supposed to talk about that. Anyway, looking down here...
We can't talk about that for tax purposes.
Of course. Looking down here, the Cancellara... Bob, I'm amazed here that this leading group of 8 riders is still surviving, because at the top of the Col de Torbie, they only had a 20-second advantage over the main field, and they've now actually managed to stretch it out to 40 seconds. Then just about 500 meters away here from the famous Promenade des Anglais, sitting on the back there, you can see Aitor Gonzalez. He's actually holding off a little bit. I think he is still part of a strategic plan for Ile Baleares. He's done hardly any work in this leading group of 8 riders, and he's probably waiting for some kind of reaction to come from Alejandro Valverde on the final climb of the day. But let's not forget, there's been an awful lot of action, especially in the first few kilometres of racing, because after about 15 kilometres, there was a very nasty crash with Ian McLeod, the Australian rider from FDJ.com, going down very hard and being taken off to hospital. And the Brazilian sprinter Luciano Pagliarini also going down in that crash, and he too had to be evacuated to hospital for checks. About 500 metres to go to the finish line, but it's not the actual finish line because these riders will be looking to around about 30. Just 500 metres, Bob, separating the remnants of the main field and that leading group of 8 riders, and that would have to correspond to around about still the 40-second mark. But it's going to be a literal explosion, I think, once they start the final climb of the day, the Col d'Ez, and I can't really believe that those 7 men in that leading group have got too much gas in the tank left, because they have been absolutely on the rivet since the 10th kilometre, which means they've led this race for 97 kilometres or 60 miles of racing.
It's been a very tough stage so far. There's been some big climbs out on the course. One last climb between Bobby Julich in history, but that is a very tough climb, especially the first couple of kilometers that go almost straight up from the coast into the hills just behind Nice, France.
And I wonder how many times Bobby Julich has gone up the Col d'Ez, one of the most famous climbs in the sport of professional cycling. The Col d'Ez used to be a finishing individual time trial. Those are the confirmation of the time seconds one there, but they're not really important at all in the overall classification, because Bobby Julich now is looking at being just 30 kilometres away from writing his name into the history books. That's absolutely true. A lot of riders are very pedantic about the choice of tyre, and of course, maybe more importantly, the choice of tyre pressure. This, I think, Bob, is going to be a lap of honour for Bobby Julich, because the way he and his team are riding, I cannot really see anybody taking the victory away from him. And he will just feel that little bit more confident as he gets onto the slopes of this famous climb, the Col d'Ez, because after all, he's spent a lot of time over the last few years just living in this area.
He lives in this area. He knows these roads like the back of his hand, trains on them every day. The Col d'Ez used to be a time trial to finish off Paris-Nice, and we had a stage in the morning in the old days, about 60 kilometers, and then a stage time trial in the afternoon. Gap going up a little bit now to 50 seconds. That won't worry CSC too much, but you'd like to see them get a little bit closer perhaps before the climb starts. Bobby Julich will have known all the corners, and he knows when to make his move. Sometimes that's a huge advantage in a bike race. If you're struggling on a climb and you know that it's going to flatten out in just a couple of corners, or you know the top is just around the next corner, well, that gives you a tremendous boost to your morale. And if you do start to experience a little bit of trouble and you know the roads, of course, it can be a disadvantage if you're having a hard time right at the beginning of the climb and you're struggling there. But I think that Bobby Julich will have this race well in hand once we get onto the slopes of the Col d'Ez.
Well, they can't give them too much time, because the man who just led round the corner there in the dark blue jersey of Liberty Seguros, Alberto Contador, started today in 22nd place, 2 minutes 24 seconds behind, and they're still, in fact, extending their advantage. It really is quite remarkable, because at the top of the Col de la Torbie, it came down to just 20 seconds gap between that leading group of 8 riders and the main field here, led by Bobby Julich's team CSC. But over the last 10 kilometres, Bob, it started to stretch out once again up to the 50-second mark. Now, if they're not very careful and attentive, Alberto Contador could cause a very interesting surprise here.
Contador being just a little bit over 2 minutes behind, hoping that the pressure will come off from Team CSC. That's a lot to hope for, and we'll have to see if that works out for them. But they're going to start the Col d'Ez here in just a little bit, and we'll see if Valverde or Zavalla has enough energy to attack Bobby Julich. The last shot we had of our race leader, he looked to be pedaling very comfortably. You can see him there in the yellow jersey with the just in 4th position is Bobby Julich, sitting there in perfect spot right behind the strong East German Jens Voigt.
CSC on the front end of the main field, around about 1.5 kilometres now away from the start of the Col d'Ez, a climb which goes up to almost 500 metres above sea level. 7.8 kilometres of climbing, that's 5 miles at an average gradient of 6.1%. You can actually almost feel the nervousness coming through the main field. There's Bobby Julich up into 2nd or 3rd position. Oh, and I don't think they expected that coming round the corner. Bobby Julich should have done. He lives in the area. I'm sure he's been out riding to pick his croissants up from this part of the world. Well, Bob, it just goes to show, whatever you think and however relaxed you are, you've always got to be alert and attentive on a race like this.
Well, Bobby saw that corner coming, and he knew that there must be some construction around there. Went right to the front, got around that corner in good order, and that is one of the biggest advantages of being almost a local racer here from Nice, Bobby Julich. You know the race course, and if there's a dangerous spot coming up, you move into the right position and take advantage of that. Let's hope the whole field got through there comfortably, and now we're starting the last climb of the whole Paris-Nice, the Col d'Ez.
This is the first few meters of the Col d'Ez. That's Rick Verbrugge on the front, and he knows very shortly he will probably be getting reinforcements from the rear because the main field has been led and the charge has been led by Team CSC, the team of Bobby Julich. Now, this is a good move. This is Alberto Contador. He's the best placed rider in this leading group, and look at the way Moncoutier has reacted behind, because the man who is going to run out the overall winner here of the King of the Mountains is obviously thinking about the possibility of a stage win as well. Just a quick reminder, though, as they start this final climb of the day, the Col d'Ez, for the last time, it's Bobby Julich who leads this bike race overall by 19 seconds from Constantino Zabaya and 20 seconds from Alejandro Valverde. Now, Team CSC are on the very same corner that we saw that attack coming from Alberto Contador a few moments ago. Julich there, Bob, in the white and yellow jersey of leadership, and look how much they've actually closed down the gap now. That's Eric Dekker, champion of Holland, a former leader of Paris-Nice and a very good tactician.
Wonderful bike racer, Eric Dekker, and he's had a good Paris-Nice so far. A little bit of a surprise to even he himself, got third in the prologue and has been riding good. Moncoutier, Contador, and Aitor Oso, the last three riders still in the front. You can see just how steep that is when you look back down the road to see the riders behind have already been dropped pretty severely by the peloton being led by Eric Dekker still, with CSC still in pretty decent control there. There's just two men in front of Bobby Julich at this point in the bike race, and Bobby might have to come out himself and do some tempo making, especially if some of the riders just behind him, Zavaya or Valverde, put in an attack, and Contador is going again now. Moncoutier having a bit of a hard time closing that gap.
Well, Contador certainly knows he's got a very good chance of causing the major surprise here in Paris-Nice. Now, look at this. It looks to me as if this is Alexander Vinokourov, the man who won this final stage last year. They're not really going to chase him down, I don't think, Bob. He's a long way down in the overall classification, 22nd at the start of the day, but a man with a big ticket on his back because he's a former two-time winner of Paris-Nice.
Vinokourov putting in a very, very vicious attack there. You can see that he opened up daylight immediately to the peloton, led by Jens Voigt. Contador is just up the road from Vinokourov, and he's put the other two riders that were with him into difficulty. Verbrugge has been dropped, and that's Osa just behind him with Moncoutier. Contador riding very well.
Bob, this is unbelievable. This man, it was the man who won the 5th and penultimate stage this year of the Tour Down Under. And if I cast my mind back to 12 months ago, to the mining race of the valleys of the Asturias, this man actually had a minor aneurysm and collapsed in a bike race, had to then undergo a small form of mild brain surgery, and started riding a bike again towards the end of the year in November. And to see him dominating the first Pro Tour event of the year on the final stage is fabulous to see. I don't think he's going to survive and take the overall lead away from Bobby Julich, but what an incredible comeback.
Just did such a fantastic job for his teammate Luis Sanchez, helping him win the Tour Down Under just a few weeks ago in Australia. Similar conditions to this, warm and sunny. Of course, sometimes it gets a little bit too hot down there in Australia, but Contador, it's great to see him back in the bike race and racing very well.
Well, as Alberto Contador opens up the racing here on the slopes of the Col d'Ez, the final climb in this year's Paris-Nice, Team CSC at the front end of the main field still seem to be pretty much in control. It was almost like deja vu for Tom Boonen on stage 2 of Paris-Nice this year, as he managed to pull off back-to-back wins. For his effort, he also took the overall leader's jersey for 2 stages. Right now, though, this man started the day in 22nd place overall, 2 minutes and 24 seconds behind. He got in the breakaway after 10 kilometres, and now on the slopes of the final climb of Paris-Nice, the Col d'Ez, he's decided to go out alone. Now, if he can survive by about 30 or 40 seconds to the summit of the Col d'Ez, he's got a very good chance of surviving to the finish and getting the stage. An indication there I think that said 5 kilometers to go to the summit. This is a very long climb.
Long climb, very steep at the start. It gets a little bit flatter in the middle and then kicks up at the end for the last 1.5 kilometers and is very tough over the top. Alejandro Vinokourov using this climb as a launch pad to win his 3rd stage in last year's Paris-Nice. He had won the event on GC 2 years in a row, but missed out on the big splits that happened in the crosswinds when the race was so well controlled by Team CSC last year, and they've done the same exact tactic this year. They've split the race apart. It's not Jorg Jaksch, however, benefiting from that teamwork this year. It's none other than Bobby Julich sitting there in 2nd place. On his wheel, Alejandro Valverde, perhaps the most dangerous man to taking the GC lead away from Bobby Julich. You can see the front of the field there, still struggling to get over the top of this. They have 5 kilometers to go as well. CSC rider there, maybe Jaroslav Popovic on the back, just doing a good ride. Paolo Salvadetti is, in fact, winner of the Giro d'Italia a few years ago, and going to try to come back and do that again for the new team, Discovery Channel.
Inside of 5 kilometers to go now, and still the attacks are coming. If you don't recognize this jersey, by the way, it's the jersey of the best young rider, and the best young rider in this event at just 22 and a half years of age is Alejandro Valverde. And look how deep Jens Voigt is trying to dig to get himself back up there to nullify all of these attacks. And the best way to defend is to attack, and Jens Voigt now has decided to set all the pressure on the front end of the main field, and they are pulling back all of the riders who've attacked on the slopes of this climb. There is Moncoutier, he is coming backwards. There is Aitor Oser, the man on the front we've almost forgotten about, who launched an attack within the first kilometre of this Col d'Ez, is Alexander Vinokourov. But what a great job of work Team CSC are doing over these closing kilometres. Inside 3 miles now to go to the summit of the Col d'Ez, and then it is all plain sailing downhill for Bobby Julich, looking at writing his name into American cycling's history books. Americans have been very good at this race in the past. Last year, Bobby Julich himself was in 3rd place in the overall classification. Before that, Lance Armstrong was 2nd overall. That was back in 1996, and a few years before that, let's not forget the great Greg LeMond was the best performer ever in this bike race.
For years and years ago when Greg LeMond was racing, what a great professional he was. He was dangerous throughout the year and, of course, won the Tour 3 times, let's not forget. But Greg LeMond was also very solid in the classics as well and loved Paris-Nice. All the riders like it because you start in the frozen tundra of Northern Europe and you come down to these beautiful roads in the south of France. Yeah, usually in the sunshine, not always, but usually once they get to Nice, it's a sunny day. What an incredible ride being put in now on the slopes of the Col d'Ez by Jens Voigt. Reduced the front group to about 15 riders, those accelerations. Things will regroup a little bit now as the tempo is a little bit less, but Valverde, even his biggest attacks did nothing to dislodge Jens Voigt and Bobby Julich from the front of the race.
A little bit of history about that jersey that Bobby Julich is wearing there. The yellow has obviously been brought in because this race is now organised by the same organisation as the Tour de France, but originally the Paris-Nice jersey, which started back in 1933, was a white jersey, and that was because the newspaper L'Aurore, which was the original sponsor of Paris-Nice, was printed on white newspaper. And we all know that the reason we have a yellow jersey in the Tour de France was the original magazine L'Auto was on yellow newsprint. And that's why nowadays they've managed to try and keep the history there, Bob, by amalgamating the yellow and the white into the leader's jersey here at Paris-Nice. But let's not forget our man, Alberto Contador. He's looking now to ride himself pretty high up in the overall classification. Started 22nd, but he's probably dreaming about the outside possibility that he could cause the big surprise. You're watching stage 7 of Paris-Nice, and you've just seen a very excited Vicente Reigns take an unexpected win back on stage 3 for Il Baleares. That was also the last stage that Lance Armstrong participated in, as he dropped out of the race due to illness. 2005 Paris-Nice didn't start well for Lance Armstrong, with a lowly 140th place in the opening day's prologue. He never really looked comfortable, but after all, this was his first turning of the pedals in anger at the start of this season. Maybe a little bit better on the next day when he finished at the front end of the main field in 44th place, not too far away from the winners. But things started to look bad on stage 2 when he finished only 90th, quite a long way behind. The difficult thing for Armstrong, though, was I think he was suffering with the weather conditions. Probably the most cold Paris-Nice we've experienced over the last few years, and Johan Bruneel thought it was better to pull out.
I think it was a good decision because the way the race is going and with short stages, very fast, is definitely not what he needs right now. He needs long rides and easier rides. So normally, if it's a 200-kilometer stage, let's say the first 150 are okay, and then they're just racing the final. But this was not the case, of course. So it was just for his overall fitness also, and thinking in the long run, it was better to go back to Spain and to do some good long training rides and come back to racing when his fitness is better.
Very interesting insight coming from Johan Bruneel there, and if anybody knows about how Lance Armstrong prepares for the Tour de France, it's certainly that man. 53 seconds now, the gap between Alberto Contador and the front end of what remains of the field. Just 20 riders, I believe, riding alongside Bobby Julich. This man started the climb with a 50-second advantage, and he's outstretched that just a little bit more. He really is doing a phenomenal ride, this young man who's just 22 and a half years of age, winner of the penultimate and the most difficult stage this year of Paris-Nice. And look at this. A little bit of panic on board here, as we can see now Il Baleares moving to the front. That is Alejandro Valverde on the right-hand side, the leader of the Best Young Rider competition. And obviously a good ride here by Liberty Seguros, because the team manager is now starting to move forward, and you can see just how the tactics are starting to unfold, because from being the attackers, it now seems as if Il Baleares are having to form an alliance here with Team C.
Also on the front, and they're doing tempo rather than attacking right now, realizing the danger of perhaps Valverde himself losing his third position on GC to this man, Alberto Contador. And Ilyes Baleares realizing now, if they don't chase this guy and get the gap down a little bit, they might lose third place on GC, and that would put him off the podium. They'd lose valuable Pro Tour points, this being the first event in that series of the year. And so Aitor Osa has come to the front to start doing some tempo, and that helps CSC a little bit in the long run. And at the end of the day, when you have two teams chasing one rider, it's almost impossible to stay away. So Ilyes Baleares now at the front of the bike race. Jens Voigt can take a wee bit of a respite there, and his teammates from Team CSC. Here comes another attack. That might be Jörg Jaksch. No, excuse me. That might be Gilberto Simoni from the Lamprey squad.
Another reason why these riders are chasing very hard at the front end of the group, because the leading team in the classification is in fact Team CSC, and they have just a 2-second advantage over Liberty Seguros. So if that young man off the front end of the race, Alberto Contador, does survive and win the stage, it will also give the team victory to his team, Liberty Seguros. Now, if you had time to look down there, and these riders certainly don't have that time, you would actually see the Principality of Monte Carlo, where we have the Grand Prix Monaco in Formula One. These riders really don't have much time to look at the magnificent backdrop we've got here, because this is one of the most beautiful backdrops for a bicycle race in the early part of the season. Getting a glimpse there, just look how cool and collected Bobby Julich was compared to the style there of David Moncoutier.
Moncoutier in the breakaway all day, got all of the King of the Mountain points. He will be the winner of that, assuming he gets back into Nice in good order. Good ride by Moncoutier to have the King of the Mountain in a very tough bike race, but now he's being dropped by the pressure being put on the front of the bike race by CSC and Alejandro Valverde.
It's Constantino Zabaya in the yellow jersey just behind Bobby Julich there for the Saunier Duval team. And I tell you what, Jens Voigt has done a sterling job, because there are not many riders left in this group with Bobby Julich, and there's only one man he really has to worry about, I think, in this bike race, and it's this man, Alberto Contador of Liberty Seguros, with a slight advantage. But you know what? They will not give up. They will throw everything they can at Bobby Julich to try and crack him over the final few kilometres of this climb. But still, Bobby Julich can count on one man. Jens Voigt, the big German, is doing absolutely everything to keep this race under control. On stage 4, Fassa Bortolo's Fabian Cancellara grabbed the win and took hold of the overall lead. The next day, though, on the climb up to the Montferrand, he couldn't stay with the pack. That resulted in American Bobby Julich taking over the race lead. But one rider who deserves just as much credit for the CSC effort here at Paris-Nice is Jens Voigt. Bob Roll tells us more. This is Jens Voigt, the German rider, coming into the finishing straight. This man was dominant in the early part of last year. And boom, there it is. Big Jens does it again.
Last Sunday, Jens Voigt, the gritty CSC rider, battled cold and icy conditions in Paris and forged his name into the history books for taking the first ever win at the Pro Tour. After an impressive victory at the Tour of the Med and already 5 wins on the season, the German continually proves that he should be on everyone's radar this season. The 33-year-old time trial specialist plays an important role on Bjarne Riis's team through his speed and aggression. The bulk of Voigt's career has been spent in green, the color of Crédit Agricole. His first major win came in '99 when he conquered the Criterium International. But one of the biggest moments of his 8-year career came in 2001 when he achieved every cyclist's dream, a stage win at the Tour de France. Since signing with Team CSC last year, Voigt has been consistent, adding another Criterium International win to his resume and finishing second in America's biggest race, Le Tour de Georgia. After a 4th place finish here at Paris-Nice 1 year ago, Voigt was a possible selection to win this time around. But after teammate Bobby Julich took the overall lead, an unselfish Jens Voigt focus shifted to riding in support of his American teammate Bobby Julich, who couldn't be in better hands.
He certainly is. A man like Jens Voigt is the linchpin of many of the top professional cycling teams, and he certainly will have a price on his head at the end of this season if you're thinking about building up a brand new team. Inside now, the final kilometre, 1,000 metres to the summit of the Col d'Ez for the lone leader, Alberto Contador, still holding on to around about the 1-minute margin, but just seeing the referee's car being pulled out there, the guest cars being pulled out, that's always a bad sign, isn't it, Bob? Because you know that the referees are clearing the gap between the leader and the chasing group behind.
We'll have to get the time gap. It was 53 seconds the last time we checked. Here's a Liquigas grass rider. That might be Franco Pellizotti. Not a lot of results for that team so far in Paris-Nice. They'd love to get a stage win out of this if at all possible, but absolutely hardly any daylight being given to this rider from Liquigas by the Team CSC, led by Jens Voigt, still making the tempo, and what an incredible job he's done. I can't believe he's still on the front of this very select group, going so hard that it's almost impossible to attack, and the gap has indeed come down a little bit to 45 seconds to that man, Alberto Contador, still in the front after almost a whole race-long breakaway from the beginning of the day's stage.
Beastie boy, Jens Voigt, what an unbelievable man. It's almost like a replay of last year, but on that occasion he was doing all of the work for Jörg Yats. Now we're looking at 500 metres to go, and this used to be, in years gone by in Paris-Nice, an individual time trial. A winner on many occasions was a man by the name of Sean Kelly, who was and has to be regarded as the king of Paris-Nice. He won Paris-Nice from 1982 right the way through till 1988, and he was completely and utterly undefeated. In fact, he didn't win it an 8th time because he changed his tactics the following year and went to ride Tirreno Adriatico.
I think he followed that up with a win in Milano-San Remo. And what a great champion Sean Kelly was. It is indeed Franco Pellizotti from the Liquigas team. He's finished on the podium in the Giro d'Italia in years past and starting to come alive now. Once we've gotten down into the sun in the south of France, a good ride being put in by Pellizotti. I think it's going to be very tough for him, however, to close the gap on this man, Alberto Contador, who only has a few 100 meters left before the top of this climb and the plunge back to the finish line in Nice, down on the water's edge there on the Côte d'Azur.
The road will slightly dip down and give him some respite. This man has done a fabulous job. He escaped after just 1 kilometre of the ascent of the Col d'Ez here. He lost initially a little bit of his time advantage, which was 50 seconds at the bottom of the climb. It went down to around about 40. Then he started to stretch it out once again. But look at the job and the devastation that's being caused by the tempo of one Jens Voigt, former East German rider, turned professional back in 1997. But today, he is an incredible ally as we get maximum points here for Contador. Jens Voigt has been an unbelievable ally for Bobby Julich on the slopes of the Col d'Ez. In fact, he's been an incredible ally for the last 48 hours.
Absolutely. He's been doing a great job. A contender himself after winning the prologue in this race, but he's given up all of his own ambitions to help his team leader, Bobby Julich, try to win this bike race, and they are just a few 100 meters away from the top of the very last climb, and if they can get over the top, get down, Bobby Julich will become the first American to win Paris-Nice, and that would be a great result.
A bit of an acceleration coming up there. That's Jörg Yats on the front, on the right-hand side, the leader of Team Liberty Seguros. And, of course, let's not forget the winner of Paris-Nice 12 months ago. Now, there's a little bit of a flurry of attacks coming off the front end of the field there. And this looks like Eric Decker's having a bit of a problem at the back end of the group. He's lost himself about 15 to 20 seconds. And that is Jose Luis Rubiera at the back. We haven't talked about him very much during this Paris-Nice, but certainly we will do later on when Discovery Channel go to the Grand Tours. 35 seconds now separating the lone leader, Alberto Contador, to a group which is down to around about 16 riders, containing Alejandro Valverde, Constantino Zabaya, and of course Bobby Julich at the top end of the overall classification. So far, so good for Bobby Julich as he inches his way closer and closer to the finish. We'll be right back. Gilberto Simoni was the first across the line on the major climbing stage of this year's Paris-Nice. But one person everybody at home was tuning in to see was Lance Armstrong. He didn't come out to race on day 4, citing illness. Still, the rest of the Discovery Channel is out on the roads in full force. And as Bob Roll explains, we'll be seeing a lot more of them this spring.
With a brand new system requiring all the top teams to be present at the Pro Tour races, Discovery Channel manager Johan Bruneel was faced with restructuring the upcoming season schedule.
There's a lot of changes. Basically, in the race program, we have to attend to more races. Basically, the 3 big tours, the Giro, the Tour and the Vuelta, plus another number of important races.
We will try to win for the first time a classic. We have never won a World Cup race, and we have a very strong team for the classics for this year.
I'd say that this is probably our most complete classic team that we've ever had. And then you throw Lance into the mix, and that's going to be a notch above anything we've ever had.
You know, I did the classics, or at least a lot of the classics, 2 years ago. So it hasn't really been that long since I did them. I've been second in Liège-Bastogne-Liège twice, second in Amstel Gold Race, I don't know, twice. It's time to finally go and try and win one of the monuments of cycling.
This past offseason, many new faces are added to the roster to strengthen the team and build for the future.
Yeah, I'm very excited with the new additions, with some new young riders. We have Savoldelli, we have Popovic, we have Tom Danielson.
Unfortunately, one key rider did depart in the offseason. Mr. Floyd Landis, looking for greener pastures with the embattled Swiss outfit, Team Phonak.
Well, Floyd's is a bit of a double loss because he's, number one, a good bike rider, but number two, he's an American. But us, like every other team, has financial restraints. We would like to have kept him, but it happens every year where we just simply can't match offers. Nonetheless, we wish him well.
But Lance Armstrong has never made any bones about riders leaving his team to try and ride for themselves, but he only really considers what's important for him and the rest of the team.
And here's another attack by Alexander Vinokourov, but maybe a little bit too late. Not quite enough power on the last climb of the Col d'Ez.
Alexander Vinokourov now trying to repeat the victory of last year. He escaped, though, very early on last year's final stage, and that was about 4 kilometres to the summit of the Col d'Ez. We've gone over the summit now. We've already started the descent of the final climb of the day, the Col d'Ez, and the riders will be looking to see if they can just feel the outskirts of Villefranche-sur-Mer in the distance. But this man is still holding on to his coattails, because I'll tell you what, he has managed to survive by 30 seconds over the front end of the main field, and the way this group is going down the descent, he's going to have a very hard time surviving. But there are not many men in this group, and all of them have actually got a different ulterior motive for keeping this group together, because they all want to make sure now, I think, Bob, that they retain their positions in the overall classification. And Vinokourov, well, he doesn't care, does he? All he's thinking about is the win.
He'd love a stage win. That would be a great way to salvage this Paris-Nice for the twice winner of the event. Contador put in a great climb, but he's going to have to follow that up with an absolutely awesome descent if he's going to want to hold off this man, one of the best descenders in the game, the Kazakh rider Alexander Vinokourov from T-Mobile, coming down this last descent like gangbusters, it's going to be tough for Contador to stay away.
It's actually pretty impressive when you watch a man going down a descent like this. A lot of people have always said to me, the motorbike's not dangerous to the bike riders, but you riding both a bicycle and a motorbike know that the rider can actually use the motorbike to his advantage on a descent like this, not necessarily getting into the slipstream, but keeping a close eye on how the motorbike rider actually uses his brakes gives you an indication of what the corner's going to be like.
If the corner is coming up a little bit too quickly, you'll see the motorbike just in front of you coming back at you like a stone. You'll know that you need to slow way down. Of course, they can accelerate much more quickly out of the corners, but the bike racer, being a much lighter vehicle coming towards the corners, can sometimes close that gap. And it is quite dangerous at times. We've seen the TV camera motorbike men sometimes get tangled up with the riders, but all of them such incredibly talented professionals. Both the camera crews and the bike racers don't oftentimes see big prang-ups, but once in a while, and it's inevitable on these small, narrow, twisty roads.
Symbiotic relationship between the cameramen and the press and the bike riders in the race. They spend a lot of days on the road together, and only the best motorbike riders in the world actually drive those cameras or the photographers' bikes on the course. And they know the sport, don't they, Bob? They know which way a rider is going to go into the corner. They know from which direction the wind is going, because they're out on the open roads 150 days a year like many of the bike riders.
Yes, absolutely. And these images would be impossible to get without the very talented motor drivers out there.
As the race gets closer to the finish in Nice, we'll take another short break. Pictures there of yesterday's stage winner, Joost Postuma, who managed to take his first career win as a professional. But as this race winds down here on stage 7, we might be seeing the first American win overall in Paris-Nice as Bobby Julich looks to make history. Inside now, 10 kilometers to go, 6 miles to go for Alberto Contador, and a few moments ago I wouldn't have given this man any chance at all of surviving to get himself the victory, but he is still conserving 30 seconds advantage over Alexander Vinokourov, the two-time winner of Paris-Nice and a winner of 3 stages last year, including, of course, Bob, the final stage here into Nice. I don't really believe that they're going to let him ride off the front, because just look at the front end of that group. The work is still being done by Jens Voigt, who has been absolutely remarkable. If we could give a prize out for the man of the match, it would have to go to the German.
Most valuable player for Bobby Julich for sure in Team CSC. One other CSC rider left in an incredibly select group. And they just need to shepherd Bobby now to the finish line. A few more corners between Bobby Julich and American cycling history to become the first American winner of a great race, one of the most beautiful races of the whole calendar, Paris-Nice.
Yep, there's been a lot of success in Paris-Nice over the years for American cyclists. Oh, and Contador pulled his foot out there. That was unbelievable. He was taking so many risks on this descent. Let's just have a look at that again, Bob. This is the unbelievable thing about clipless pedals, and that is a bike rider. That, mate, is how to handle a bicycle in a moment of an incident. What an unbelievable performance.
That was the greatest save I've seen in a long time. Heading straight for the wall with one foot on the pedal, both tires sliding. Somehow was able to save that. That will give a rush of adrenaline straight to the heart. That might be just what Contador needs to go all the way to the finish line. An unbelievable save there. Almost crashed into the wall, but saved it at the last moment. Vinokourov is chasing. Maybe he got a report on his earpiece that Alexander Vinokourov was chasing him, and he got a little bit extra nervous there.
I tell you what, Bob, 17 seconds the advantage, but I thought for a moment that was going to be a boom, boom, and out go the lights, because that man was on the verge of going down. I really don't know how he was able to do that, but that's an incredible thing about a professional bike rider, isn't it? You are always alert, you are always ready, and when you try and analyze how you recovered from an incident like that afterwards, you don't know. It's animal instinct.
Absolute 100% pure instinct, and just barely got the bicycle right back underneath him. Alberto Contador is now streaking to the finish line, but the gap continues to come down. Just 17 seconds to Alexander Vinokourov, one of the best bike racers in all the world. And if he's trying to close this gap, and you can see that he's still just in front of the peloton, Vinokourov making progress, cutting into the lead of Alberto Contador.
Alexander Vinokourov still trying to chase the win. Alberto Contador still off the front by about 17 seconds. And Bobby Julich slowly but surely in that group behind. is riding himself into a little piece of American cycling history. As the race gets closer to the finish in Nice, we'll take another short break. Alberto Contador right now is slowly but surely counting away the kilometres. Bob, I really can't believe that this man can survive. He was part of an early man breakaway but got clear of the main field after 10 kilometres. 7 riders building up a lead of 1 minute and 50 seconds at one stage. This man, though, decided when they came to the final climb of the day, the slopes of the Col d'Ez, that he was going to go it alone. He managed to conserve the majority of his advantage all the way up to the summit of the Col d'Ez, and then now all he can do is hope to survive. But can he hold off the comeback of Alexander Vinokourov?
It's going to go right down to the wire. Contador with 50 seconds at the bottom of the Col d'Ez, 53 seconds at the top. You know he's still got a little bit of energy left, and it's just a question whether or not he can hold off Vinokourov, who is chasing flat out as hard as he can.
Frank Schleck on the front now, the Luxembourger, and look at the damage that's being done at the back, and this is really because of all of the work being done by Team CSC. Eric Decker, he was off the back at the top of the climb, if you remember, by around about 15 or 20 seconds. There's the junction. Alexander Vinokourov has now joined Alberto Contador. 2 riders now lead this race, but it is very much far from over because the 2 men are only separated by the front end of the group by 15 seconds. 15 seconds is all they have got.
Vinokourov doing an incredible ride there, closing the gap to Contador as he lost his pedal for a moment. Maybe the next couple of corners after that, he went through a little bit more carefully. Vinokourov now has gotten back up there. One thing Contador has is that he's been caught on the downhill, so if he can sit on the wheel of Vinokourov for a little while, he might be able to catch his breath and still have enough energy for the sprint to the finish. 6.5 kilometers to go to the finish line.
6.5 kilometres of racing left as we look here at the Luxembourger. Frank Schleck on the front doing the pacemaking for Bobby Julich. Theoretically, they have absolutely no reason to catch these 2 riders who hold on to a 15-second advantage. But maybe it's a question of pride. Maybe Bobby Julich wants to ride onto the Promenade des Anglais with his team all around him and in the same time as the winner of this final stage. I wouldn't expect any help now to come from Alberto Contador to Alexander Vinokourov. It's always difficult racing in the south of France, isn't it, Bob? Because there is so much traffic and not very many roads, and there's always the worry there's going to be a badly placed car on the road.
Yes, most certainly. You can see Vinokourov right on the rivet, looking back now to Contador to ask him to pull through. Contador saying, look, I've been out on the breakaway since the beginning of this bike race. If you want to win, you're going to have to make the tempo. I'm sitting on the wheel.
I don't blame him. I'd do exactly the same thing. Just sit there and try and get a little bit of your oxygen back if you can, because there's no way at all that Alberto Contador has got very much left in his tank. This is the group that contains Bobby Julich with all of the big challenges to him. Constantino Zabaya, Alejandro Valverde and Bobby Julich just sitting there comfortably waiting to get to that point, and he will be there shortly. The Promenade des Anglais and the final few metres of Paris-Nice. Down the final gradients and into the outskirts of Nice, they will circumnavigate. Now, this is very strange, Bob. Alexander Vinokourov, as a well-drilled professional bike rider, has to understand there's nothing left in Alberto Contador's legs. The man led the race from the 10th kilometre. He's been at the front of the race for 120 kilometres. Surely Vinokourov has to understand if he wants the win, he's got to do everything.
He's got to put his head down and bolt as hard as he can to the finish line. Looked like Paolo Salvadelli was dropped a little bit at the top of the last climb. He's one of the best descenders in the game, has reintegrated into the front group. Jaroslav Popovic now doing the tempo. Maybe they're looking for a stage win here on the last day of Paris-Nice. Vinokourov, however, he just needs to go as hard as he can to the finish line. One would presume he's a little bit better sprinter than Alberto Contador, and Contador hoping they don't get caught, then he would have no chance to win. He's also hoping that Vinokourov is just that much slower than he is if he has a chance to catch his breath before the finish line.
Alberto Contador getting himself a win this year on the 5th stage of the Tour Down Under. And there's confirmation of the time gap between the 2 leaders at the front and this group containing Bobby Julich, the overall leader, just 15 seconds. Discovery Channel, a big comeback there. Look at this acceleration. Vinokourov now, Bob, is trying to ride Alberto Contador off his wheel, and that's an indication that Contador doesn't have that much left. Il Falco, the man you were just talking about, Paolo Savardelli, is an unbelievable descender, and he's used those descending abilities to regain the main field on this descent. Didn't quite catch that there, but we must be looking at around about 4 kilometers to go. We're just going around the old port of Nice, very beautiful part of the Côte d'Azur, and once they come around this corner, they will be starting to line up for the final charge onto the Promenade des Anglais.
Vinokourov has been frustrated a little bit, not being able to drop. Contador, who is glued tenaciously to his wheel. He's looking back to see the peloton. Once Discovery Team starts to chase, they've got Luis Urbieta still in the front group. It's down to 10 seconds. Discovery Channel putting in a huge chase now. Savardelli, not the fastest sprinter on the block. Watch for Eric Decker, perhaps to burst out of the field. You can see him just catching on the back at the very back of this very select group. It's Rubiera as well as Savardelli on the front of the peloton. 3 Discovery riders in this final breakaway of Paris-Nice. The Discovery Team has come to life now.
Eric Decker certainly is a very good tip for the win here. He's a very clever bike rider, but those 2 men at the front are still holding on to around about 150 meters advantage. There they are. Alexander Vinokourov now, as they go inside of the kite, which indicates just 1 kilometre to go, has got to do what they say in the cycling circles around Liverpool, bury himself. He's got to not think about the man behind him. He's just got to give everything he can to staying off the front end of the main field, because there will be a reaction in that bunch. They are organised. Don't mess around. No tactics. You've only got 10 seconds, man. Just keep riding, because you should have the ability in those legs of yours to get the win.
Yes, this is not the time to start looking at the rider behind you to contribute to the pacemaking. Vinokourov will look back, see the group, know exactly how much of a gap he has, and there it is, the attack from Eric Decker coming. A great bike racer, very smart, but look who's chasing him. Still with energy, Jens Voigt.
Jens Voigt still got plenty of energy. Eric Decker's hit them, he's hit them hard, but maybe too far from the finish. He hasn't created the surprise. Vinokourov is still not very confident at all. He keeps looking over his shoulder. You've only got 10 seconds. If you look back, you will see the shadow of the main field coming up. Alberto Contador playing very calm and collected, just staying on the wheel of the Kazakh rider. Those meters are slowly but surely ticking by. The motorbike has been taken off, and there, as we look down, it's the acceleration coming from Alexander Vinokourov. Right through the middle, though, it's Constantino Zabaya in the yellow jersey. There's Alejandro Valverde as well. The man who leads the young rider competition is coming right through the outside. He's going to take this the final stage. Alejandro Valverde, the closest challenger to Bobby Julich, wins the final stage there and will move up to second place in the overall classification. He's going to be 10 seconds down on Bobby Julich, but let's not panic. Let's just relax a little bit, because we have just witnessed a little piece of American cycling history. Bobby Julich has run out the overall winner of the first event in the Pro Tour, and the first time ever an American will climb up onto the top step of the podium here at Paris-Nice.
Unbelievable ride throughout the week by the American Bobby Julich to take Paris-Nice for the first time of any American. Alejandro Valverde, we've been saying that he's a very fast sprinter. He just proved it today, but take nothing away from Bobby Julich.
Win number 3 of the year. Look at that. The moment there was Alexander Vinokourov was starting to open up his sprint, but look at the acceleration of Alejandro Valverde on the left-hand side. As they say in French, Bob, excuse-moi, papa, that was quite easy.
That was quite an easy gap there. Look at that advantage he had. In a small group like that, Valverde almost unbeatable. He has a great turn of speed and came up with a stage win, and that will move him into second place on GC, so quite a good ride there by Valverde. But there's the man of the hour, American Bobby Julich.
Third in the Tour de France in 1998, and then all of a sudden, for a couple of years, Bobby Julich was swimming around in the sport of professional cycling, trying to find a place for himself. And finally, in the last couple of years, he's found a home for himself. He admits that he feels so confident and comfortable with Team CSC that over the last couple of years, to me, he's become a completely different bike rider. And here, I think this has to be one of the crowning moments of his career, a win overall in Paris-Nice. As we look down at the remnants of Paris-Nice coming forward here, this looks very much like Rick Verbrugge coming up to get himself a lowly place. And I actually haven't seen Tom Boonen coming forward, but Tom Boonen will run out the winner of the points classification, I should think, in this race. Although, with that win today, Alejandro Valverde might come very close, just edging out Franco Pellizotti. Kim Kierken, the Luxembourg champion from Fassa Bortolo, in third place. And you were right, Jaroslav Popovic wasn't too far away there in fourth. And Eric Decker, I thought, was just a little bit closer to the front there. So we'll just check. Let's not forget these provisional results. I'm sure I saw the red, white and blue of the Dutch national champion up to the front end of the main field.
They have Thomas Dekker listed, but I don't believe he was in the front group. We think it's Eric Dekker. We'll find out when we get confirmation of his results. No doubt about the winner of the stage, however, Alejandro Valverde, just catching Vinokourov a few meters from the line. Vinokourov and Contador mucking around a little bit too much and lost the stage.
Well, if Alexander Vinokourov had had a fraction more guts and a fraction more confidence, he probably could have got himself that stage win. But the man who was calm and collected and waited for the final explosion to the line was Alejandro Valverde. Take a note of that name. He's got a massive cycling future ahead of him. There you could just see, it did look as if it was the red, white and blue of Eric Dekker, but in fact that may well have been Kim Kirken, because with an attack in the last few kilometres, well, Eric Dekker probably did fade over the last 100 metres or so. Contador did a fabulous job attacking after 10 kilometres and managing to stay off the front end of this race right up until the final 50 metres. And just tagging on the back end of this group, I just caught a glimpse of the yellow and white jersey of the race overall leader, Bobby Julich, making it a big first for American cycling. The scene we're looking down on here is the scene that is normally full of people enjoying the summer months, and today it's been the backdrop for the end of the first edition of an event in the Pro Tour. And strangely enough, trying to work out the classification of the Pro Tour, if Oscar Freire, who is currently racing across the border in Italy in the Tirreno Adriatico, wins Tirreno Adriatico, well, the fact that he's won 3 stages will mean that he will be the first leader of the Pro Tour and not Bobby Julich. So Julich's going to have to keep his fingers crossed for the next couple of days. Well, looking down here, this is the man who won the stage and the man who we'll see an awful lot more of in the future. Alejandro Valverde taking out the final stage here of Paris-Nice in a very well-timed sprint. In that sprint, earning him a 10-second time bonus and moving himself up to second place in the overall classification, as well as winning the Best Young Rider competition at 24.5 years of age. And here is confirmation of the final overall classification. Bobby Julich being the first American rider ever to win Paris-Nice, just 10 seconds ahead of Alejandro Valverde and Constantino Zabaya. But Jens Voigt, 4th last year and 4th this year. Not a bad ride for the German. Just looking a little bit further down, Franco Pellizotti finished in 6th place. Cadel Evans, a very strong 8th, and David Rebellin moving into the top 10 on the final day. Our pre-race favourite, Alexander Vinokourov, moved up to 16th place on the final stage. The other Americans, Tom Danielson, 38th, and Floyd Landis, capping off his week here at Paris-Nice in 46th. The other 2 Americans, Freddie Rodriguez and Dave Zabriskie, well, they didn't finish on the final day. Well, this is the moment that Bobby Julich has been waiting for about 48 hours, or probably for his whole career, to try and get himself this victory, and he's looking nice and relaxed now after having spent the last 48 hours since he took the overall lead at the summit of the Montferrand. Probably, Bob, I would say, waiting for this very special moment in a town which I suppose we would have to say is his adopted European home.
This is his training grounds where he spends most of the season when he's in Europe. He knows these roads like the back of his hand. He has them totally memorized. Another lion for Bobby Julich, and the best one of the bike race, the one on the last day. He will become the first American to win Paris-Nice.
3rd overall in the Tour de France back in 1998, but he's waited a long time to win a big bike race like this, and he certainly has over the last couple of years been a rider who has been born again, we would have to say, because I obviously thought a couple of years ago that his career was going to be over, but it certainly is not. Well, Bobby Julich has crowned off a very good start to the season for Team CSC after the Tour of the Mediterranean, basically in the very same area as this. They now take out the overall win in Paris-Nice. And as Bobby Julich moves away from the podium, not too far away from him, he'll find Craig Hummer to find out just exactly what the man's first words are going to be.
I tell you what, we've talked a number of times over the past few days. You knew you had a great team out there today, but were you surprised at all by any of the other team's tactics?
It was up to them to make the race, and you know, Soner Duval, they attacked like crazy, and Valverde had a couple good digs on the Col d'Ez, but you know, I had my motorcycle Jens Voigt riding point, so for me it wasn't really that big of a problem. On the top it got a little sticky there, and then I kind of hooked handlebars with one of the motorcycle guys, and that really put me off my game for 5 or 10 seconds there, but then once we were already on top of the climb, so I knew nothing was going to happen. And it was kind of hard for me. I didn't really want to chase Vinokurov because he's one of my best friends, and we train here on these roads all the time. So I was kind of defying orders and not riding there, and they caught him at the line anyway. So Valverde won the stage, but what a race! I mean, like I said, it's a little bit overwhelming right now to come from where I was to where I am now, and I'm just so appreciative, and I'm so glad that I didn't give up.
At what point in this stage did you really let it sink in? I'm gonna wear the yellow jersey home tonight.
It still quite hasn't sunk in yet. No, I mean, there was never a moment of doubt. Up at the top, with about 3K to go, I said, okay, now if I have a mechanical, I get the same time as the front group, so it's okay. And, Jorg Jascha, my ex-teammate from last year, who I worked for very hard last year, came up to me and shook my hand with 3K to go. And right then and there, I said, maybe I can win this thing, but it's never over till you cross the line, and now I'm very, very happy.
Well, you're in the history books, the first American to ever win Paris-Nice. Certainly this has to be the biggest win of your career. Does this change your aspirations at all for 2005?
It doesn't. Last year, I kind of had a new philosophy of every race I want to go to, or every race that I'm in, I want to be a part of. And, that's just something that Jens, Voigt, and I bring to this team is constant motivation and constant morale. And, I'm not resting on anything. There's a lot of work to be done. And honestly, Bjarne Riis being my coach, we really haven't worked on these really short, hard anaerobic efforts. We've been doing a lot of 20-minute efforts, 30-minute efforts, 15-minute efforts. But so I think I have a lot of work ahead of me, and it feels really good.
Bobby Julich looking very relaxed and recovered, I should say, after 48 hours, defending the lead in Paris-Nice and finally taking out the overall win. But Bob, I don't think really the power of his victory is yet settled in.
It takes a while after a bike race for the accomplishment to come to you and to actually resonate in what it means to the public at large. You're so concentrated on the job at hand, whether it be to defend the race leader's jersey like CSC and Bobby Julich have done throughout the last few days of Paris-Nice, or just to get to the finish line. The French were thinking, oh, perhaps we have a chance now that Lance Armstrong has dropped out. So sorry, but it's another American, Bobby Julich from Reno, Nevada, taking a great win, and the first time an American has won Paris-Nice.
That's right, and let's not forget, don't stay too far away from your sets, because we're back next week with Cyclism Sundays, and every week right throughout the cycling season. Saddle up then for Cyclism. Every week we take you right into the very heart of the peloton, from the cobblestones of France to the mountains of Italy. Cyclism Sundays is always going to be there. And next week we'll see what happens in Milan-San Remo, the very first one-day classic of the year. Cyclism Sundays, next Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, only on OLN. And we've got lots more stories too if you log on to our website at olntv.com. Coming up next here, it's Outdoor Outtakes. Once again, well done to Bobby Julich for his win at Paris-Nice. And on behalf of Bob Roll, I'm Paul Sherwen saying bye-bye for now and see you next week, same time.